period where the previous generation were coming to the end, and questions were being asked as to where's the next group of players coming from. You know, we haven't got anyone to replace the likes of the players that have gone before them. And the coaching team at the time, David Pearson and Paul Carter, came under a little bit of pressure, but they always said, "Oh, don't worry, there are players there." And as soon as that first generation left, there was an explosion of what we're now calling the golden generation. Just that group of players that started to move into being world class.
You shine like gold.
This group that just wanted to be the best, and they ended up being the best ever.
They knew what they wanted to do and achieve, and they sort of knew what it took to do it.
Yeah, well, I started playing, I guess, a bit, you know, officially at 7, where you get your racket and you start playing.
I suppose I first started, my parents played, my brother played, so it was always, it was always in the family really, so I would always go up to the squash club with them.
My dad was a keen amateur player. He took up the game when he was sort of in his late teens, early 20s, so quite late. Yeah, he started playing, it was like his main passion, and yeah, took me down the club, as you do. I just knocked about with a few of the other kids and ended up going on court, hitting a ball, mucking about, and that's how I got into it, really.
My dad was a coach, still is a coach, so he was at a club as the head coach there, and you can't fail but to be drawn into that world.
Obviously I've seen James since he was in nappies, and he's literally played since he could walk. I mean, I remember when he was 2 years old, and he's toddling around, and he's got a racket in his hand, and he's any ball and racket, you know, he'd be throwing, kicking, running, catching. So he had that. He was on court literally from when he could walk. The amount of balls that he was hitting, by the time he got to maybe 7, 8 years old, he'd probably hit a lot more balls than a lot of other kids. So his skill level was just like, oh wow, you know, where did he come from?
Back then I used to play a lot of football. Football was my kind of first love, I guess, but then once it got to under 10 level, the FA said that girls couldn't play in boys' team, and I was the only girl in my team, so I couldn't play, so I was pretty devastated about that.
And yeah, I was just down, you know, with them, and they also both liked to socialise a lot, so we were, you know, down the club, and they were in the bar a lot, and you were just sort of left on a squash court. I think that's how a lot of squash players started playing back then. So
then instead, on a Saturday morning, I went to junior club at the local squash club. Loved it, and yeah, I was down there pretty much as I can since then, and yeah, got into it quite quickly.
I remember actually knocking up in the garden. I used to have a sort of, actually probably a tennis racket and a ball, so against the wall, and really enjoyed that. So I think that probably transferred me onto the squash court.
Probably first got to know Al when she was playing senior squash for England. I do remember seeing her play as a junior, mind, at the British Junior Open, and she had a very different forehand back then. In terms of in England coaching fraternity, you know, she's always been first on the team sheet, and she's always somebody that you know does everything that she can on that given day.
Looking back, I think squash suited my personality. It's an all-action sport. There's something happening all the time. You know, in between points, there's not anything more than, you know, 5-10 second gap. I made loads of friends in squash as well. There was a real camaraderie there. Like if you're at a junior tournament, if the matches weren't on, 30 kids would be on one court playing 3/4 court, they call it, where you queue up in one corner and then 2 people play a point for the other 3/4 of the court, and then the next one comes in and you join the back of the queue. And if you keep losing, you know, you play 1 point and then you join the back of the queue and you have to wait for 5 minutes. So that breeded satisfied the competitive. I'm the world's most competitive person.
Well, Nick used to come to national squads when he was about 10, 11 years of age, and he'd come every weekend or when we had the squads. And I always thought the one thing about him, I always looked him around, I thought his technique was horrendous, basically. But the one thing he had was just this determination. He used to wear his shorts up to his chest, which was another thing he probably didn't like me talking about today. But he always had that grittiness. That's the main thing that I noticed, was that will to win.
Yeah, it wasn't always going to be squash from my point of view. For me, it was always every sport, and because you're good at sport, I think you quite enjoy playing everything when you're younger. And then I went to college probably and got a scholarship for my squash, which was something like £1,000 a year to go to college and to help me with my squash. And I wanted to play on the hockey team, and they wouldn't let me because I got my scholarship for squash. And sort of that's when I think I realised actually this is becoming a bit more serious now, where they're actually saying, no, you're not allowed to play hockey, it's too dangerous for your squash.
I remember I stopped playing for the school on a Monday night after school because I had a team match at squash on a Monday night, and I played a couple of matches, and I was so tired from playing football that I couldn't play well at squash, and I was like, well, I can't do both here. I stopped playing football and just played the squash match for the men's team on the Monday night. And I think, again, subconsciously, you're just making these sacrifices, and you start prioritising one sport a little bit more over the others.
I went to Loughborough University, which is a great uni, had a great 3 years there. Towards the end of that, so in probably my third year, when the stuff starts getting real and you're like, okay, now I need to go into the big wide world after I've finished, you know, and the months are counting down before your final exams, etc. You sort of think, well, what am I going to do after? Squash was appealing. Yeah, and that was the decision, like give it a go for a few years, see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, I've got a degree and I can do something else, no worries. And if it does work out, then I get to be a pro athlete, which is very cool.
You know, I just always remember being very, very interested and obsessed by the game. And I used to love going to training, and I used to love playing other sports. And obviously by the time I was playing and winning British championships during my teens, it was probably a thought then, but I don't remember one day thinking, this is it. If there was any such moment, it might have actually been at the big tournaments, because I remember then when I came to Wembley Conference Centre and when I came to Manchester to watch the national championships, that lights a little bit of fire in you.
For me, I never really made one conscious decision of becoming or wanting to be a professional squash player. It was kind of just a natural progression from quite an early age, really. As soon as I started playing, I was lucky in that my stepfather was David Pearson, who's national coach, so I was kind of always open to the world of professional squash from a very young age, and I knew that it was easily a possible career kind of thing. So, and I just loved squash, so yeah, it was a natural progression for me, and it was something I always wanted to do.
Jenny just plays like you just pick up the sport and play. She's like a natural, really, in many ways. And you know, she can't be anal, and she has a slightly different view than maybe a lot of players have. But had a fantastic career and is the most England cap lady player ever. So what more can you ask?
It was probably from college I started really thinking I could give this a go, which seems quite late because I'm 17, 18 by this point, and I've represented England and I'm aware that there's a pro tour, but I still had plans to go to uni, and it was only really when I thought, let's just give it a bit of a go, and deferred my uni place. So it was 18 when I thought squash was for me properly, there's no other option.
She's done it! Absolutely amazing! Laura Massaro is the first English lady since Lisa Opie back in 1991 to win the prestigious British Open. What a steely performance by the world #2.
Some people think, oh, because I've done 2 sessions a day, I must be training hard. But I think when you get older, you realise you train hard, but it's kind of, you're smart as well with it.
Al wasn't probably as technical as some of the other players, and she had this kind of straight forehand that she used to hit. Yeah, and I always thought that was going to hold her back. And then she worked with a coach at the time, Paul Carter, and I think they tried it a few times, but she wasn't ready for it. And then finally, when I don't know, when she was probably about 15, 16, maybe a little bit older. She finally kind of decided that, right, I'm ready for this now.
She went off to play the British Junior Open. I think Al was seeded, I can't remember, I think Al was seeded 4. So she's due to get to the semi-finals of the British Junior Open. Must have been under 16s. She'd lost first or second round. And I'd seen her play and she still had this, dodgy forehand technique. I said to her, I think we need to stop the coaching relationship here because, we're not moving this forward. It's not changing, and that was a very turning point in my coaching, really. It took a lot of courage to do that because I didn't want to upset, and so the coaching stopped for a couple of weeks, and then it was Alison's mum who rang me and said, "Oh, Alison's ready for the, ready to perhaps have a look at that forehand," and the rest is sort of history, really. She just, changed. It didn't change overnight. It still took a long time, and now you're talking about probably one of the best forehand volleys in the ladies' games.
And she committed to it. And I think that's what a player has to do. When they decide to commit to something, and it comes from them, then you've got a chance to actually change something.
I think when you're younger, you kind of, I know probably myself, you do sessions where you've not really thought about it. The coach has led the session. You have not really had any input, or it's easy for the coach to say, "Oh yeah, let's do this," and actually, is that what you need to work on? That sort of things. Whereas now, I think as I've got older, I think your relationship with your coach has definitely changed. And now, if I have a session with my coach Carts, he'll say, "Oh, what do you want to work on?" And so I will say, so I would lead the session.
You can look at a lot of players that play and say, "Oh, they've got the talent to be a top 10 potential. They've got the talent to be a top 10 potential." And at the end of the day, it comes down to dedication and hard work, really. You're obviously honing your skills all the time, trying to improve it. The mental side of the game is massive as well, and you have to have the belief that you can actually do it. But that hard work and dedication, for me personally, was the difference.
It's a lot of things that have come together for me to make me a squash player. A damn lot of hard work is the first thing. Then I had great coaching. I've had enormous support over the time. It's just so much has gone into it, and it's not just me getting up here and putting the hours on court every day, which that's the bulk of it, because you do have to work bloody hard. That is the one thing that has to be there. But I've needed the coaching, I've needed people helping me, I've needed physiotherapy. Has just been a huge part of my career.
There's only 10 players in the whole world that can be in that top 10 of a certain sport. So it's easy to say when you're 100 in the world or when you're a young kid, like, "Oh, he's got the potential," but until you actually go and make that actually happen in reality, like, it doesn't really mean anything.
Naturally, I was blessed, luckily, with good hand-eye coordination and skills, and I loved playing, so I wanted to be on court all the time, hitting squash balls, competing against the best players. So I actually found my improvement up the rankings not really that hard. I mean, anyone can be talented, but you have to be dedicated and you have to put the hard work in, which I did. Like, there's no option. You can be 20 in the world maybe, and it is hard. Don't get me wrong, that's a great achievement. But to get top 5 in the world, you have to have everything pretty much. You can't just be skilled with the racket. You have to put the hard yards in as well and dedicate your life to it.
If I had a pound every time, what I'm doing day in, day out is not that special. It is hard work, it's grind, but it is consistently working on your weaknesses every single day. It's not having a really good week and then having a couple of days slack. It's not having a good month and then going off the rails for a month. It is consistent day in, day out, and I think you'll find that in any sport, hard work and consistency will outweigh anything else.
She seeks people that can help her. She doesn't have a problem with working with that player for a little while and maximising everything she can take and glean from them. And then when she feels that she's learned everything she can from that person, she'll find somebody that will take her even further, and that's what she's done throughout her whole career.
It's all about what I need to do to be a little bit better. Coaching, she's changed coaches. She went and worked with Phil Whitlock, who who got her fit and strong and gave her a new direction. Then she saw something else that she wanted to do with her technique, so she went and saw David Pearson and worked on things that she felt that she needed to do to be better than she already was. I think when she left Phil, she was 3 in the world or something like that, and he'd take her up to that level. But then she still wanted more.
We tried to look at the analogy, okay, let's not just try and get your level back to, let's say it was before when I was playing my best a couple of months ago or something. It was always like, well, how can I get better? How can I get better at these areas? How can I improve again? How can I keep improving? Because it felt like if you stand still, other people catch you up anyway. So you want to always constantly trying to evolve and freshen up and new ideas whilst keeping the things that work well as well.
I know with Nick, again, as Laura, SJ, James, those type of players, they kind of unearth things that are very critical. So very smart, they're very good at looking at what I need to do to get better.
You know, he's constantly evolving when the game's evolving. He's constantly moving forward with his game when other people are moving their game forward. There's no resting place. And if you play somebody like that, if you know there's no resting place when they're not on the court, then you're pretty sure there's going to be no resting place when you're on there with them. And he certainly plays that way as well.
It's just an immensely complicated answer to try and answer the question of why England have had a really strong period in their squash history. I don't, you know, I could sit here all day trying to think of why it's happened and how it's happened, and a lot of the things that have been there for us, like the squash clubs, the coaches, the facilities, and all these things, and the funding, are all there now.
Yeah, I think we had great role models prior to this generation. We had a lot of top players that were ranked in the top kind of 10, top 5, top 10, but we didn't have winners of British Open or world titles necessarily. They had role models that were top players, but this group just wanted to be better, I think. You know, they looked at that and said, I want a piece of that.
The golden generation, but I mean, all the girls are like roughly the same age, so Alison, Jenny, Laura, I say SJ is obviously younger, but those three especially, they were in the junior team when I was, you know, playing the Europeans. They were the 3 sort of best female players, all pushing each other. I think for them especially, they've all grown up and pushed each other quite hard and got to obviously a very, very high level.
Alison was a top junior from the age of 10, 11, 12. She's one of the best in the country. Her, Jenny, and Laura, you know, playing each other, and one would win one week, one would win the next, and I was sort of 1 or 2 in the country at 12, 13, 14.
I don't know how many, 5 or 6 of us the same age who've come through the junior ranks together. I think has helped us all want to get better as well, because it's competitive. Like, obviously we know each other well, but when we go on court with each other, we still want to beat each other.
We're all different personalities, and you're obviously going to get on with some better than others, but I'm sure regardless of whether you're best friends or not, we've all learned a lot from each other, and we'll always like have an eye on each other at tournaments. And yeah, it's nice really when you think about it that we've all grown up together and kind of been on tour, been competitive, but yeah, learned a lot from each other, I would say.
I think in any kind of area, if you've say got one player and they're not really challenged by their peers, it's hard, because the only exposure that they're going to get then is out on the international scene.
So you've got a group of very determined and like-minded individuals, and I think once you do get a special group like that, everyone does push each other on, which brings levels through. For example, sort of when James Wilstrop was coming through as one of the most dominant juniors, straight away people like Peter Barker and Darryl Selby were having to raise their levels to be able to sort of cling on to those players. So straight away there's a level being set, a standard, and then people are having to follow to be able to keep up.
Yeah, there's sort of quite a few of us that pushed each other really hard in the juniors, like trying to beat each other, I guess. So when you've got a few players all of a very good level rather than just one being standout, you know, clearly good. I mean, James was that. He was standout good in juniors, but we were chasing him hard. and I think that raised our level as well, really.
I think what created this golden generation for me were two things. I think the lottery program and the money was at its best. The way the coaches were, everything was working really well.
There was funding, there was backing, there was a lot of support. Sports science started to come into it. So you had determined characters who were then getting a lot of the right information and a lot of input. And I guess that sort of coupled with the role models that they sort of had to aim at and to overtake led to something that was obviously proven to be really successful.
And I would say if you look at all the children, their parents came from the golden generation of squash players when the sport was at its most popular in the 70s. So if you look at all the players, Nick Matthews' dad, big squash player, Darryl Selby's dad, big squash player, Jenny's father, big squash player, then obviously myself, and if you, I'm trying to think, Alison's mother, I think, played for Australia. So they're all children of squash players from the big time when squash was incredibly popular.
The impact of this group is immense, and it's immense because it's helped to inspire hundreds, thousands of young players to get involved. It's captured the imagination of coaches, officials, volunteers, club players. You know, people always, or have always, taken an interest in how that generation and those players are getting on.
Now I think it's our responsibility as coaches to make sure that we utilise them and get the information out there, you know, and whether it's via a documentary or whether it's Laura Massaro, who's been coming to England squads, junior squads, and working with the players and is very passionate about giving her information, and Nick Matthews done it as well. He's come to squads in the past where he's spoken to players, he's talking to them about what he did, what they need to do, and the more we can use them and utilise them to be able to give their passion and what drove them into becoming what they achieved, the better for our players.
As I've said, it's really important for me at this stage of my career to try and inspire the next generation, and I can only really do that when I'm winning major titles, and I have to remember that I'm trying to lead from the front and lead by example, try and show them that just because the Egyptians are dominating, you know, a lot of the game at the moment, that you can be British or English or European and still be up there fighting with them. And
you can retire an age and just say, look, I'm 34, 35, I'm done now. But I think if I'm still enjoying it, if I'm still moving, all right, and I'm still as fit and challenging at the top of the game, there's no reason to stop. You know, Nick's a good example. He's you know, 37 years old and he's top 4 in the world. I mean, that's age is but a number, and if he's still playing at the top of the game, if you're still playing at a great level, then there's no reason to stop.
I mean, it's something that I've done my whole life, so it's very hard to suddenly just stop, especially when you don't have a definite backup plan. And I think there's part of me, just the last few years haven't particularly gone to plan squash-wise. So I basically would like to finish playing at a level that I'm happy with.
I'd like to still be playing in 3 or 4 years' time, definitely. I think if my body holds up and I'm still enjoying it, that's be the biggest thing. I think if you stop enjoying the travelling and all that, then it'll be time to call it a day. But I still have aspirations to win some titles, and yeah, I'd like to be involved in more team events, and obviously we've got the Commonwealth Games next year, which is a big goal.
Clearly, winning things leaves a mark on anything, but I'd love it to be about more than that. I'd love to be able to sort of try and get the sport into the mainstream with your achievements, not just have them and lock them up and keep them to yourselves. It'd be great if it could inspire people to play the sport and inspire people to know about the sport a little bit.